everybody. Thank you for coming. We always appreciate it when you can carve the time out of your busy day to come spend a few minutes with us here. And hopefully this one, this particular webinar, we know is very popular. It's a very current topic. The concept of speech recognition has been around a long time. I mean, we've had a product on the market for almost 15 years. But I have to say, in the very earliest days, it was a struggle to gain acceptance just because the technology was new. But now the speech recognition technology has really reached a point where if a solution is properly deployed, there's pretty great value. And we're going to talk about both that value, the concept of why it's good, as well as the particular pieces that we do in our product with speech recognition. So if you look at the technology itself, it's probably getting more popular now at a faster rate because of mobile devices. It's not that you haven't, called in maybe as much as 10 years ago and to an airline or someplace and received a speech recognition application that talked you through it. And some of them have been really, really good. Some of them have been sort of marginal. But it was still sort of a new technology, and people were not all that comfortable with it. But along comes the speech recognition capabilities in our mobile devices, and now it's worth it. Now we learn how to deal with it. Now we're going to spend the time to figure out how to talk to Siri or any of those applications because they're very productive, very useful, whether you're in your car or just searching for something. We figured out that if we take a little bit of extra time to understand how a speech input kind of application works, then we're going to get the value back from it. And it makes things faster, and it depending on how you use it, it can do a lot of things for you. And we tend to look at kind of 2 or 3 levels. We'll sort of break those down as we get going. But it's all based on the fact that it's easier in some cases to talk to a machine than it is to talk to a person. So that's why you see so many self-service applications. Now, granted, a lot of these are driven by cost reductions. Once you stand up a machine with 40 ports on it, you've got 40 agents ready to go 24 hours a day who pretty much never call in sick. And that's why you see larger call centers, airlines, banks, places like that, offloading the simpler business, the things that are easy enough, they're repetitive, they're information access type apps that a speech application can do quite well. And we're seeing a lot more of those. And as I said, the mobile devices have figured out various ways to augment how you use your mobile phone. And some of it is simply because it's faster than typing, and some of it's because the environments sometimes lend themselves to speech. A hands-free environment like when you're driving, speech does some wonderful things compared to having to be balancing your mobile device on your knee and trying to type on it. And we see desktop applications as well, both for dictation and specific applications, as well as for any kind of non-visual access you need for handicap reasons. So all of that have driven the technology to be much better, much more reasonably priced. And now we can start looking at using it within an enterprise to accomplish the same kinds of things. So if you look at, our product's been in the market over 15 years. We're using the ASR engine made by Nuance because Nuance is the recognized world leader in speech recognition in this market. And so while we don't use their applications, we use their engine. We license their engine because they've got, millions of hours of time understanding speech rec and developing it. And then once we've got that on our platform, we have a wide range of applications that we're going to look at, both for the outside caller and the user. And they're different, those applications, because the users can be more sophisticated because you can do a little bit of training, whereas the outside callers need to be very intuitive because they're calling in once and you want to make sure you capture that transaction. And we'll also talk a little bit about the fact that there are people that speak more than one language. You might have an application where you have to recognize multiple languages, and we certainly can do that as well. So if you look at kind of the basic pieces where we'll break down our speech recognition applications, the easiest one to understand, I think, and the one that probably has the most obvious ROI in most cases, and therefore it's the one that a lot of people are interested in right up front, is the speech rec automated attendant. The ability to answer a call and prompt that caller to speak to get to where they want to go, who they want to get to, things like that. Now ours goes far beyond what you'll find in the market for most people. Once again, 15 years. That's given us a lot of time to learn what customers really want. and things like being able to speak a name in the directory. Almost everyone does that. So that's kind of a starter level feature, and there are things we've done to improve that, but that's pretty much what you'll find in any speech automated attendant. But now you start things like alias name support. How many alias names can you have for a user? Because let's face it, there are a lot of names that when they're spoken will be different. I use a doctor as an example because it's an obvious one. So if you have Dr. John Smith, the caller might say John Smith, Dr. John Smith. And you need to be able to recognize all those. Plus nicknames like Johnny Smith might be something. So we have a very strong support for alias names. We have unlimited alias names, which means you can tune that and make sure that that application is very easy to use and very productive. And then you have the same kind of issue with multiple names. Particularly in our larger enterprise accounts, there's very likely more than one person with that name. And certainly a name like John Smith is one of those where you'd likely come across that. So we have the ability to use what's called disambiguation, which is when we see multiple name matches, we have some definition for what we want to prompt the caller with to narrow that list. So you might hear something like, if someone said John Smith, it might come back and say, do you mean John Smith in the Chicago office or John Smith in the New York office? Or it might come back and say, do you mean John Smith in accounting or John Smith in sales? We have multiple levels of disambiguation, which is probably the thing you'll find missing, serious disambiguation, missing in most of the competing speech automated attendants. We learned very, very early on. We started as slightly smaller accounts, and as we grew into enterprises, we had to grow those features along with it. The second piece is sometimes rolled into the automated attendant, but it's really kind of a different piece, and it's the outside caller interface. Meaning, yes, when I call into your speech automated attendant, I'll be prompted and I will say a name. And that's where the speech recognition ends for most kinds of products. And we'll see why, because of the architecture. But in our case, we can take that speech recognition further. In other words, they'll say a name and it'll go out and it'll ring somebody, and when it comes back, we can still talk to them with speech commands. That's kind of what they're expecting. So we can say, I'm sorry, Neil Butler did not answer. Say, locate, try another person or operator. So we still have those options of using speech all the way through until that user is basically done with using the system. And that makes the process much, much smoother. And then the last piece, of course, and this is the piece that not a lot of people look at kind of as at a start, but as soon as they play with it a little, they get very excited, and that's the user interface. Now, people have looked at other product user interfaces and said, yes, I can see where that's fun, but I don't see how it would be that helpful. Once again, 15 years, our user interface is just an amazing use of the speech recognition. Basically, you don't ever have to touch a button on your phone. So for a hands-free type solution. And that's not just simple things, but that's the ability to listen to your messages, to have your email read to you, to read your calendar, to create an appointment on your calendar, to change your mailbox options, basically everything. And we'll go through some examples of all this so you can get an idea of what it's like. So in those areas, what we've done is we've tuned our platform so that you can add the functionality onto the existing CX platform to do any or all of these solutions. And we'll start with the speech automated attendant, because that's the one that I think most people probably will understand from the beginning. I think everyone's experienced this. So basically you build some scripts on our product, and then the process becomes one of simply making sure the caller understands what they need to say. So, you can't just say, well, what would you like to do? Not for a casual caller, because they're not sure. They're going to stumble with that. So you have to prompt them a little. So for speech automated attendant, that's pretty simple. And the script would sound something like this.
At any time during this greeting, you can simply say the name of the person or the department you want to reach. For a list of departments, please say option.
John Tyler.
Who's calling, please?
Mark Reed.
One moment, please.
So there you have the speech automated attendant plus the outside caller interface. We kept that speech session going. We made it easier for the user to get through that process. So I have call screening turned on for this user, so it prompts for the caller's name, and then basically it's going to take that next step for the transfer for whatever it is. Now, our product is a little different than some of the competitors' products. It's not a separate server. It's not a separate box you buy. It's part of our basic system. So all those other features that you may have come across in our other webinars, all the fantastic find me, follow me, and support for link, and all these things we do, That's all integrated into this. This is just another layer that you would put on top of it. So if you look at Speech Automated Attendant, and particularly if you're looking at acquiring one, there's things you need to look at. Particularly the newer the system is from the vendor, the more you need to be cautious about things. But things like, does a user want to be in the speech directory? You know, there are some CEOs who really don't want people to simply have the ability to call and name. And then we talked about alias names and disambiguation. Those are all important. We need things like, if I have Speech Rec Automated Attendant on a CX system and it's covering multiple locations, I probably want separate directories for those locations. In other words, when somebody says John Smith in Chicago, I only want to be looking at the Chicago people. So the ability to create local directories in a larger enterprise environment is very important. Departmental transfers without having to pay license fees and things for that is one of the things you want to do. And then synchronization with an external user database is important, because while in our traditional product, where everyone would have a voice mailbox, we don't have to worry about those users. But if we're going to use this strictly for Speech Rec Automated Attendant, you don't necessarily want to manually, add all the users. So you might want to use an LDAP inquiry or something along those lines to actually update what names we're going to recognize and, what their relative phone numbers, etc. And then the last piece that I think most people miss is it isn't just a directory on our product that's speech enabled. And that's, for everyone else, that is what it is. You can say a name, and then it goes down and says, but for this, press 1, for that, press 2. In our case, everything's speech enabled. So the menu would say, hi, welcome to our company. Please say the first and last name of the person you'd like to speak to. For directions to our facility, say directions. Or if you'd like to take our survey, say survey. We're fully speech enabled, which makes that a kind of a continuous experience for the user, and it's a much smoother process. So we looked a little bit at that outside caller interface, where once the caller said the name and was in the process, we still have some things we can do with speech to make that process easier. So in this case, we're going to kind of show you what the experience would be if somebody used the speech rec and went to transfer, and that first extension didn't answer. So this is tying together speech rec plus some of the find me, follow me features of our system.
Who's calling, please?
Mark Reed.
One moment, please. John Tyler is not available. Please say, locate, leave a message, try another person, or operator.
So this was a process where they said the person's name, we had call screening turned on, so it asked the caller for their name, and now that name becomes something that the caller that'll follow that call all the way through. So if as a user I get presented with that call, it'll say you have a call from Mark Reed. So I have great information about how I want to handle that call. And then because that first number didn't answer, we prompted the caller with speech still in terms of what do they want to do. And locate would mean, this user has more than one number in their call list. So in our product, rather than ring 5 numbers at once, for someone that has multiple devices and desk phones, we actually use context to know, what the correct device is, what the most likely device is, and then we let the caller kind of go through devices. So all of that is part of that outside caller interface. So between the Speech Rec Automated Attendant and the outside caller interface, we have by far the most robust speech interface for outside callers. And it's very simple, and you have to keep it simple. You can't expect an outside caller to be knowledgeable. You don't want them to have to say long, complex phrases. You want to prompt them, in many cases, in terms of what they can say. And then, of course, underneath that, there's help prompts and all those kind of pieces as well. So what we found is with our product, when it's rolled out for a Speech Automated Attendant, acceptance is very, very high. These are very successful applications. The second piece is a lot different because this is our user interface. And we consider users somebody that we can give them some more complex tasks, enable them to do more, because it might take them a day or two to get used to the interface, but this will be something they call into multiple times. So what we're going to look at doing is basically supplying all the features of our system that we supply over the DTMF telephone interface, but do it with speech commands. So message management, I can obviously get to my voicemail messages, read my email messages over the phone. I can do incoming call screening with speech commands. I can make calls outgoing with speech commands. I can access my calendar. I can use my contacts, my groupware contacts, to do all sorts of things with speech commands that I really can't do very effectively with DTMF commands. And then the critical mailbox management, the things you might want to change in your mailbox while you're out and about on a day, like redirecting your calls or going into Do Not Disturb, those kind of things. All of those are part of our speech user interface. No one has a speech user interface that comes anywhere close to having all the functionality we have. Now, to be fair, nobody else has a 15-year product that's been in the making for that long, so we do have an advantage in that area. So when we talk about getting messages, this is probably one of the easiest pieces. Now, the command you're going to see here that, the user speaks is get new messages, but there are many more commands than that. And people sometimes say, well, what I really just want to do is get new email. And they figure out pretty quickly, all I have to do is say help, actually, and we'll tell them that they can say get new email messages. Or they can say get new email messages from Bob Smith. So you have a great amount of power as you get more and more comfortable with using this. But even the first day you use it, when it calls in, pretty much people can get this kind of experience.
What would you like to do?
Get new messages.
One moment, please. You have 3 unread messages. Message number 1, an email message from Mark Reed. Message subject, the Martin Project. Message body, hi John, we need to talk about the Martin Project. Call me as soon as you can.
So that's just a typical session where I'm having an email message read to me. But it goes far beyond that because I can now process this message. So I can't just read it and know about it, but I can say things like delete this message, forward this message. And I can not only forward this message to another system user, or I could forward the message to somebody in my contacts. If it's a contact, I have other information about them. So I might be able to also say reply to this message. Now, the way I'm going to reply to an email message, which is a text message, from the telephone is record an audio segment that gets sent back to that originating email address as a WAV file attachment. So he's saying here we need to talk about the Martin Project. I can call back and I can say, reply, and it'll say reply, record your message, and I can say, listen, Martin, how about I set up a meeting for next week at 5 o'clock? And then I'm driving down the road, and a few minutes later, I get his reply that says, another email message, and it's read to me. It says, yes, that will be fine. Could you set up the meeting? So it's as if I have a true virtual desktop. And all of that gives me the strength to be productive in environments where normally I'm not so productive, or maybe to be more safely productive, depending on how bad you are at using your devices when you're in your car. But not just messaging. We talked about things like call handling. Incoming call handling on a mobile device is something that most people think means answering the call. And sometimes that's what you want to do, but sometimes you'd like to know a little bit more about that call and make some decisions. What's more important, what you're doing right now or that incoming call? So we do a couple of things in that area. We do data pop-ups on mobile devices so you can see who's calling before you answer them. But probably the most productive thing for a remote employee that we do is we'll let them find out who's calling. And remember that we ask that caller to record their name, or if it's somebody from the system, it'll automatically know who's calling. Then we can tell you who's calling, and then we can give you a choice. So I can say accept call, which will transfer the call to me, reject call, which will send it to voicemail, acknowledge call, which we're going to look at here, which lets me actually record a private message back to the caller without having to commit and take the call, transfer call, which would let me transfer the call to another user or to another of my devices for fixed mobile convergence, or review call if I didn't capture that whole message. So let's kind of listen to what that session sounds like.
You have a call from Mark Reed. Please say accept call, reject call, acknowledge, transfer call, or review call.
Acknowledge.
Please record a brief acknowledgement.
Hi, Mark. I'm in a meeting, and we'll call you back when I get out in about an hour. So if you think about the number of times your phone rings and you look down on it and you don't know who it is, maybe you're getting ready to walk into a meeting. What most of us would do without this kind of technology is we'd just let the call go to voicemail. We can't really, on the door there, stop and answer a call. Because if you answer somebody's call and you say, oh, gee, talking to you is less important than what I'm getting ready to do right now. That doesn't go over very well. But with this feature, you actually get to make those kind of decisions. So maybe if you're getting ready to go into a meeting like this, you're going to do that. Or, maybe you're walking down the hall and, you're going to want to transfer to your desk phone instead of answering it on your mobile phone. So the ability with simple speech commands to do both incoming and outgoing calls, major part of the user speech interface. And you notice these commands are very easy, very intuitive. It's very simple to use. Before I said, you might get that email message and you might reply to it that, yes, how about we do a meeting tomorrow? And the user replies back to you with an email message that says, yes, could you set that up? Well, you can actually do that. So here's what it would sound like to set up a meeting.
What would you like to do?
Get my appointments for today.
One moment, please. You have one appointment on Tuesday, July 9th. Appointment number 1 is a meeting scheduled by Alan Thomas, starting on Tuesday, July 9th at 2 p.m. for 30 minutes. Subject: software update discussion.
Well, I guess I should look at my own screens a little bit more because this is actually reading appointments. I could do the same thing to set an appointment, and I would say, create a new meeting for tomorrow at 2 o'clock for 2 hours. And it would come back and say, record a subject for the meeting. And I would say, discussion with customer. And then it would come back and say, who would you like to invite? And I can not only invite other people on my system, but I can invite anybody in my contacts. So that customer that said set up a meeting, I say their name, and now they will get an email with the meeting invite, plus anybody locally that I invite, and it's now on my calendar. And the reason we record a subject is so you can go into it when you get back to a desk and kind of type in a subject as well. So the calendar is a major piece in terms of the kind of virtual desktop we offer for people who are out. If you're the kind of person that spends your day or some of your days in your car going from meeting to meeting, customer to customer, these kind of tools give you an incredible boost in productivity. And you're much more responsive to your customers because it's not, well, let me wait till I get back to my office at the end of the day to get all this going. You keep up on it as you go through your day. One of the things we're going to do is use contacts. Now, doing things like creating a meeting or sending messages to the email address at your contact, those would be very difficult, if not impossible, to do by spelling them with a DTMF pad. So this kind of technology really requires speech. But once I have the contacts in the system, now this prompt here is just showing you can go in and read your contact info. I don't think anybody really ever does that. But what is in that contact info, and let's assume it's synced with your Exchange contacts. What's in that contact info is your contact phone numbers, their name, and their email address. Now, their phone numbers means when I get an incoming call into my system and I'm capturing the ANI of the caller, I will look that up against records. So if you get a message from somebody in your contacts, it'll say you have a new message from this phone number who matches your contact, Mark Reed. So that's one of the things we do with the contact info. The next thing is I can now call that customer at any of their numbers. I can say, call Mark Reed, and it'll say business, work, or mobile, whatever numbers I have in the contact form. I say mobile, and it places that outgoing call. I can send a new message to a contact, and they'll get an email message with a recorded voice file. I can forward an existing message to a contact. I can, as we saw earlier, I can invite somebody to a meeting, when I create a calendar event, if they're contacts and they're in my system. So that ability to work with contacts it just expands that system from just being useful within your own user group to all of your contacts. Makes a major difference in terms of what kinds of things you can do. So if you look at the user speech interface, the ability to access the calendar and that integration with the contacts, all very, very important. There's quite a few settings for the ability to change how your mailbox is working during the course of the day. If you decide you don't want to take calls for the next 2 hours at all, you can go ahead and enable Do Not Disturb with a speech command. Or if you decide instead, while your schedule says you're going to go back to the office, but you've changed your plans, maybe you're going to work in Starbucks for a couple of hours, you can actually change it so all your calls come to your mobile phone using a speech command. So the speech commands are really, really good. And once again, this product's been on the market, so we discovered things like you have to kind of put a call on hold. We discovered this early on, and my number one problem with the interface is I'd be listening to messages, I'm out driving, going to appointments, I'd pull into McDonald's to get a Coke, and I'm talking to the lady in the box, and she's reading messages to me. And now I drive up to the window, and I start talking to the lady in the window, and both of those ladies start getting confused, or maybe I'm confused. So the ability to hold a session while somebody comes up into the hall and talks to you, let's say, and then to go back to that call, those are very much third and fourth level features. Those are the kind of things you want to evaluate when you're really looking for a user speech interface. And then the total hands-free connection is probably kind of the most startling piece that's missing from everyone else's speech interface. And here's what this involves. I get in the car, I'm driving between appointments. I call in, I'm listening to messages. My boss calls me, I get a little tone in my ear saying, you have a call from Tom Menifee. I say, accept call. And now I'm talking to Tom. Tom hangs up. I'm still in my system. It goes right back to where I was before. I listen to a message. There's an important customer that needs to talk to me right away. Well, I know who they are because I captured their A&I number. I have their contact, so I just say, call back. Even though that was an incoming email message, I now make a phone call out to that customer. We resolve that problem. They hang up. I'm still in the system. It lets me be productive. Just like sitting at a desktop, you don't start and stop your computer every time between communications. You don't want to have to do that with a speech interface. And what you'll find is what everyone else offers in the way of a speech interface. Once you do anything conducting anything to do with a call, when you're done, you have to call back in again. We've just had a lot of time to make this work. And the basic way we approach it is different. And this is one of the hardest points to get across in just a little bullet point kind of PowerPoint slide. But the way we built our product is completely different than what everyone else did. What everyone else did is took their product and either bought or built new products and integrated them. So they connected them to their other product. And the end result there are products that don't really know about each other. So simple things like, if I'm logged into my voicemail listening to messages and a call comes in on that separate speech server that the competition has, they don't know that. So they're just going to do the same thing. They're going to try and transfer the call to me. There's no real integration between feature sets. They're basically going to do a blind transfer, and whatever happens on in the PBX world, they'll forward back into voicemail. The productivity pieces for that are just really weak. You can't have that call screening and the integration to the Find Me, Follow Me, and all those advanced call screening options that we have, because all of our system is one application that we're just turning on and off various bits of licenses. We do context, things with context. We know what your calendar says. We know where you are from our mobile phone application, and basically we can control the process so much more completely than anyone else can. If you look at what we have, is we have this one application. You can literally have a technician walk in the door with a single 2U rack server, throw it in your rack, take our one DVD, put it in, install everything we have on that one physical server, every bit of speech, every bit of functionality we have, and walk out, and you have everything we have to offer. Now, I challenge you with the competition to do a server count to find out what it'll take in the way of servers to duplicate what we do on one, and the count will be anywhere between 4 and 7. And remember, they're not integrated. The difference here is when a call comes in, I know where you are. I know what you're doing. I know if you're logged into the system. So all of the things we do are based on the architecture we have that says we want to be the one integrated platform that takes care of UC communications. And it's completely different. So if somebody calls in and says your name, then I'm going to know what your status is. If you're there, I'm going to let you screen a call. If you're logged in, I'm going to tell them you're in voicemail, or I'm going to get a tone in your ear and you can take the call anywhere. I'm going to have a working hour schedule for your whole system. I'm going to know your calendar status. Maybe you don't want to take a call when you're in a meeting, or maybe you want to take a call with the data pop-up on our mobile device. This integration of our applications is very impressive when you see it in use. Now, a lot of you aren't going to get a chance to see all of it in use, so we have a slide that we like to play with called the Perfect Unified Communication Users Day. And this is modeled after pretty much anybody that's mobile and out and around, in and out of the office during a day. And certainly that's all of us here at AVST. In my case, I support the East Coast and sometimes EMEA, so I might be up at 3:30 in the morning for a webinar. When I'm done at 4:30, I'm not going to go back to sleep. I'm going to go into work. And because of the way I've deployed our feature set, as soon as I drive out of my driveway, the system knows I'm available. It actually knows from our location services that I've left home. And my rules say, as soon as I'm out of my driveway in the morning, I'm fair game. So if somebody calls me, it's going to tell them he's not in the office, but it's still going to let them contact me, and I can take those calls. I'm probably already logged into the system because I'm getting in and getting a jump on my messages on my drive in, but once again, I'll get that little tone in my ear, and I'll be able to take that call. As soon as I walk into the door at work, it knows I'm at work, knows it from a number of ways, my mobile location, my link integration. Basically, I go into normal mode, which says when callers are looking for me, send it to my desk phone. If I don't answer, send it to my mobile phone. Sometime during the day, I go into a meeting, and basically, I'll, at least the minimum I'll have is a custom greeting built. In every case, the system can build a better greeting than you can, unless you want to change your greeting every time your status changes. So you might just hear, Neil Butler's in a meeting, he'll be back at 5, or maybe you don't want to play the return time from the meeting. It's really up to how the system is set up. And in most cases, people would have their voicemails, would have their call sent to voicemail. In my case, because I have the mobile phone, I'm going to do the data screen pop-up that we have. So I'll be sitting in a meeting, and I'll get this quiet pop-up, and I'll look down, and I'll see who it is, and maybe I'll hit the button, and the caller will hear, Neil Butler was unable to take your call, but we'll call you back in 15 minutes. So the fact that all of our apps are integrated is what makes this possible. I return to my desk. I go into normal mode. I go out to lunch when I drive out of the parking lot. The system knows I'm away, and it changes. And in my case, I still take calls. I just tell them I'm not in the office. Now, I come back and I head for my desk, but I don't get there. I get hijacked for a in-the-hall meeting like we all, experience on a regular basis. They're not bad things. A lot of work gets done that way. But in my case, the system knows I've come into the building from my mobile phone location service, knows I haven't gotten to my desk from my link integration, and I have this unique status. And I just play a custom greeting to a caller saying, I'm around, but I'm not right at the phone. And that sets a good expectation for whether or not I'm going to answer that call. I decide it's a little bit too busy at work. I'm going to go work from my lab at home. I'm in my car, drive out. System knows I've left work, start sending calls to my mobile phone. And in my case, when I walk into the house during working hours, calls go to my link client. That's what I use at home. I don't have a hard phone at home. I'm going to be on my computer logged in, so I use my link phone. Throughout all this, the user got fantastic information, speech commands to get there, and then custom-crafted greetings to let them know what was going on. And the user didn't have to do anything. Once this was set up, the user doesn't go in and change status all the time. We use context. We read their calendar, their location, their link client, their schedule, all of that information to create call routing that's much more effective than anyone else can offer. We roll all this together with a license called ATOM, the AVST Total Office Manager, and that includes the speech interface, that includes the basically all the connectivity that we talked about, unified messaging, the mobile device client. All of that is for what we would consider our road warrior type people. So when we look at speech, we can go as limited as just an after-hours automated attendant. We have some customers that say during the day we want to answer our calls live, and we have a conversation with them, and there's two things we'll always say. One is, so after hours, what's better? Things that just go into like a general mailbox, or wouldn't it be better if we turned on a speech automated attendant for you? And most customers will agree with that. And then the second thing we ask them is, at your attendant consoles, what percentage of calls are internal, where John calls up and says, transfer me to Susie? And they'll give us a pretty high number most time in the 25 to 40% range. So we say, how about an internal speech rec automated attendant? So what we do is craft the solution that matches your needs. Some people, they go full speech user interface for everyone, full speech front end. Others limit it down. I'd say the most typical thing is, the speech user interface, probably just for mobile employees because they get the real advantage out of it. And then an automated attendant, if not full front end, at least internal and after hours. So the choice will be yours as a customer. When we sit down and talk with people, we make sure they understand all these options. And then this is literally, you just pick them, choose them off the menu. And remember, this is a single integrated platform. So when you buy the platform, if you say, well, I don't want this today, when we come back and talk to you again about how's it going and what would you like, to add these features, we don't come back out with 3 more servers. We basically put a new license on the system. So it's it's a very easy process to grow. Start with what you need today, and then just know that you can add any of these features along the way when you decide there's something of use. And that takes us to the question screen.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil. Okay, so we do have a couple questions coming in. Before we get started on those, just want to give you a reminder, if you do have a question to submit and you haven't done that already, you can find the question pane toward the bottom. It may be minimized. Use the orange arrow in the upper corner, and you should find the question box once you expand that window. So we'll go ahead. Neil, first question. Can the speech prompts be updated or modified?
So that's kind of a mixed question in terms of when you say the speech prompts. The prompts, let's kind of start at the most basic level. The prompts on our system, let's say you don't even have speech, but things like, please enter your password. Those things are all core prompts that we build in, I think, 21 different languages now. And those generally can't be modified. So, the within the mailbox kind of things, because of, people wanting to support huge organizations with 50,000 people, we really believe in the standardization piece of it. There's a few things you can change, one or two prompts that can be changed from the administrator client, but basically those prompts remain the same. The user prompts, however, do come in multiple flavors. We have, I believe, 9 alternate telephone user interfaces you can choose from. So we have our basic one that we've had over the years. We have our basic one that's modified to do message addressing like an octal. We emulate the octal aria, the serenade, the Meridian Mail call pilot, the Intuity, the Kinesis, the repartee. I know there's one more, I can't remember what it is. So from that sense, you can say, I want my users who are coming off an aria to have the aria prompt. At that high level, we can do that as well. Now, anything that's part of a custom application, like when we call in and we answer, in a menu, that is completely under your command. So, we really would expect you to have a kind of a voice that recorded all the menus within, so it had that kind of seamless flow, and it sounded like, it had been done professionally. And so those pieces can be. But within the user interface, you basically need to select one of our alternate TUIs. And once you've done that, there's really not much in the way of modification you can do.
Okay, next question. Is the user on multiple ports when accessing their messages in speech?
Maybe. We have two ways to set this up. When I talked about the continuous connection piece, that does require 2. Meaning, I have continuous connection, total hands-free set on mine. You call me, a port comes into CX, you say Neil Butler. It takes another port on CX. It calls me, it says, there's a call from Ann, do you want to take that call? And I say yes. That call is now bridged through. And we do that for a number of reasons. 1, for that continuous connection. 2, that allows us to record calls. And it's just the way we need to do it if we're going to continually let that user, go back to their session. However, if I didn't have total hands-free, you would call in on a port, you would say my name, it would do the equivalent of a hook flash to the PBX, make that outgoing call, say I had a call. When I say accept, then our ports drop off. So that would not tie up any ports during the phone call. Now, when that far end party hangs up, I'm not connected to CX anymore, so my call goes down as well. So if you want the kind of very highest level of features, then yes, we do tie up 2 ports during the duration of calls when there's 2 users. If I just call in, I have total hands-free, and I just call in, that's just 1 port. But when there's other calls involved, it is 2 ports.
Okay, next question. Does AVST offer speech auto attendant for the outside caller without voicemail capabilities for users?
Well, from a licensing point of view, no, we don't. But keep in mind, we don't license users. So if you were to buy a 4-port CX and you wanted to put 40,000 names on it for speech recognition, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But there is no way to get it without voicemail. What we do so voicemail doesn't get in the way is we would set up that kind of system where you'd have a blind transfer. So when somebody came in and said your name, we'd go to the directory, we'd recognize your name, we'd know your extension, and we'd do a blind transfer. So in that kind of environment where you're not using us as your core system, you lose all that enhanced functionality I talked about, but you can still have a speech front end just for automated attendant, which we have at dozens and dozens of places.
Okay, thanks, Neil. It looks like actually that wraps up our questions, so we must have answered all of them during the session. Neil, do you want to close us out?
Sure, and basically the same that Ann says in terms of, we do these for you. Hopefully you find them useful. We're always very, very grateful when you attend. But let us know if there's anything else, different or additional you'd like. If there's any topics that you think would be helpful, we'd be more than happy to put webinars together on any of those. As you've probably figured out, those of you that get attended, invites to our webinars, we like talking about our system. So if you want to give us some more things to talk about, we'll certainly do that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.